When we think about the grand, chaotic theater of the Thrones Empire, we usually picture emperors and generals writing history, right? But what if I told you that sometimes history isn't written, it's seized, and seized by someone who started with absolutely nothing? This is the story of a woman who literally clawed her way from the darkest alleys right to the very top. So that's the big question we're tackling today, isn't it? How does a starving orphan become the most powerful woman in an entire empire? I mean, it sounds like something out of a fairy tale, almost impossible. But for Shangguan Wan'er, this was no fairy tale. It was a brutal, bloody climb fueled by sheer genius, raw ambition, and a scary willingness to do what no one else dared. So let's get into it. Let's start right at the beginning. All right, so every epic story has to start somewhere, right? And Wan'er's? Well, it begins in the most desperate place you can imagine. See, to really get who the Empress became, you have to understand the orphan she was. So I want you to picture this for a second. A dark alley, and there's this little kid, maybe 8 years old, just filthy, crying, surviving on whatever scraps she can find. That's our Shangguan Wan'er. And then she's found by a boy her own age, Evan. And he doesn't see a scavenger, he just sees a person. He gives her some food, shows her a bit of kindness. And that one simple act, it's going to change the course of the entire empire. But let's be clear, this rescue isn't some heartwarming act of charity. Nope. Evan's grandfather, the powerful General Wan'er, he sees something else in this little girl. He sees a tool. His choice to adopt her is completely cold, totally calculated. He literally thinks, perhaps she will be useful to me later. And just like that, with that one single thought, Wan'er is yanked out of the gutter and thrown headfirst into the brutal world of power politics. So now, she's no longer a slave, but she's not really free either. She's an investment, and for that investment to pay off, she's about to get an education like no other, one that's going to forge her ambition in the fires of the capital city itself. Okay, so to really get what happens next, you gotta understand the political system in Thrones. It's a mess. It's not just unstable, it's like designed chaos. There are no clear rules for who takes over the throne, so the empire is pretty much always in a state of civil war. You got powerful families, generals, all fighting for control. So this idea that you can be anything you want, it's not some lofty ideal. It's the reality of a broken system. And for a brilliant, ambitious orphan like Wan'er, this chaos wasn't a problem. It was a ladder. And then she sees this, an inscription that basically says, you'll be judged on your character and your hard work, not your race or where you came from or your gender. For Wan'er, this just lit a fire inside her. I mean, think about it. In a world that was constantly judging her for being a foreigner, a former slave, a woman, these words were everything. They promised a world where her talent was all that mattered. And you better believe she was going to hold the world to that promise. So, after soaking all this in, the capital, the history, the ideals, her path becomes crystal clear. She goes right back to Wan'er, the man who took her in, and just lays it all out. I want to be a politician. Just like that, no hesitation. The game was officially on. But as we all know, the ideals you see carved on monuments are a whole lot different from the dirty reality of politics, right? To play this game, especially in a system this broken, Wan'er had to make a choice, a really big choice about what kind of player she was going to be. And here are the two paths she could take, laid out right in front of her. It's like the angel and the devil on her shoulder. On one side, you've got Evan, the boy who found her, basically her moral compass, begging her, stay true to yourself. But on the other side, you have her cousin Septimus, a jaded politician who knows how things really work. And he tells her the brutal, honest truth. You can't win by being good. So she hears them both out. She weighs that idealism she fell in love with against the raw power she craves. And then she makes her choice. A quiet, chilling vow she makes to herself that will define every single thing she does from this moment on, whatever it takes. And once she made that decision, everything changed. Wan'er transformed. The student of politics was gone. In her place was a master of the game. And the price of her education? It was about to be paid in the blood of the most powerful men in the entire empire. Just look at this timeline. It is absolutely staggering. We're talking about her first 5 months as a real player on the board. Day 25, Emperor Agrippa is assassinated. 3 days later, Emperor Amdalianus is gone. An emperor who only lasted 3 days, Adrianus, assassinated. And within those same 5 months, she takes out the imperial magister Philip, who's basically the prime minister, the second most powerful guy in thrones. The speed, the sheer efficiency of it all, it's terrifying. She wasn't just playing the game anymore, she was breaking it and rewriting the rules. So, how in the world did she do it? Well, here's a breakdown of one of her signature moves. It's brilliant and horrifying. First, she learns that her target has a severe, deadly allergy to pepper powder. Step 2, she coats her own lips with it. Step 3, she seduces him and delivers a fatal kiss. And to everyone else, he just dies from a tragic allergic reaction. It's a perfect, completely untraceable assassination. I mean, it's genius. And it's absolutely monstrous. And so, she got everything she ever wanted. Power, influence, the fear and respect of an entire empire. She even became the first female imperial magister in history, the ultimate boss. She reached the top. But getting everything she dreamed of came at a price she never could have imagined. Remember Evan? The man who found her in that alley? The one person whose opinion actually mattered to her? Well, he couldn't even recognize her anymore. He looks at the woman he loves, this woman who has murdered her way to the top, and he says the most crushing thing possible. What I can see now is only her face, but her heart is a demon. And that's it for him. He decides he's done. He walks away from the monster she's become. And right then, in that moment, the iron will of Shangguan Wan'er just shatters. She begs him to stay, she pleads, she tries to follow him, and then her body just gives out and she collapses. For the very first time, the woman who controlled an empire is completely and utterly powerless. So why did she collapse? Well, the physician's diagnosis drops a bombshell that changes absolutely everything. At the exact moment she has lost the only man she's ever loved, she finds out she is carrying his child. She's pregnant. Suddenly, all that power, all those schemes, they're completely meaningless compared to this one, single, profound new reality. This news completely reshapes her future, of course, but it doesn't just erase her past. So where does that leave us? What is her ultimate legacy? How are we supposed to remember the slave girl who remade an empire from the inside out? Well, years later, as she lies on her deathbed, her final words aren't about power or politics or any of her grand achievements. They're for Evan and for their son, Bisma. Her whole story, which kicked off with a chance meeting in a dark alley, ends with a quiet apology and a declaration of love. It just brings everything right back to where it started. So let's just lay out the facts of her legacy, the good and the bad. On one hand, she stabilized a collapsing empire during the crisis of the 3rd century, a huge deal. She became the first female imperial magister in the history of thrones. Amazing! On the other hand, she systematically executed her political rivals and their entire families. She used seduction, betrayal, and murder as just tools of the state. She rose from being a foreign slave to the ultimate power broker. She was a trailblazer and a tyrant, a savior and a stone-cold killer, all at the same time. And that brings us right back to the big final question. Look, the Thrones Empire was on the brink of total collapse. Its political system was a joke. It desperately needed a firm, decisive hand, and Wan'er gave it that. But her methods, they were monstrous. So here it is. Was she the ruthless monster the empire needed just to survive? It's a tough question, one that really makes you think about power and necessity and the real price of greatness. And the answer to that? Well, that's for you to decide.